Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining this community information session on vocational rehabilitation and how to access and benefit from this service where you live. My name is Judy Thibodeau, and I'm a member of SBA staff. I'm joined tonight by my colleague, Juanita Panliner, SBA's National Resource Manager. A few housekeeping notes. You will remain muted throughout the session. You're welcome to submit questions using the Q&A feature on Zoom. Everyone who registered for this event will receive a link to the recording, which we are recording. Closed captioning is enabled. If you have any technical issues, please send a text to Juanita at 202-487-3988. Now I'm pleased to introduce tonight's speaker. Janelle Turner is a certified vocational rehabilitation counselor in the Kentucky Office of Vocational Rehabilitation. Janelle has over 22 years of experience working with individuals with disabilities, ranging from intellectual and developmental disabilities to sensory disabilities. Her areas of interest include mental health, successful post-secondary transition for students with disabilities, and assisting individuals to live their best life. Welcome, Janelle.
Thank you so much, Judy. Tell me to unmute yourself. Okay. Thank you all for giving me the opportunity to speak about vocational rehabilitation tonight. As Judy said, I work for the Kentucky Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, and I was very honored to be asked to speak to you tonight about services that vocational rehabilitation agencies across the United States can possibly provide to you as individuals with spina bifida. I wanted to just say that if you have a question, again, please put it in the chat or the Q&A. I don't mind to answer those while I am talking tonight, so feel free to do that. Give me there. So just a little disclaimer at the beginning. This is information that's an overview of vocational rehabilitation services. Each state has its own processes and procedures, so I am in no way representing all agencies across the nation tonight. So I just wanted to remind you all of that before I get started. So a lot of times there's a question, what is vocational rehabilitation? A lot of times people hear the word rehabilitation, they think of drug and alcohol rehab. But while we may work with some of those individuals, this program is specifically for individuals with disabilities. It is both state and federally funded. Most of the money does come from the federal government, though. And the focus is on self-sufficiency and independence. So basically, with the self-sufficiency, it means that you can make enough money to live on and support yourself or maybe a family, or help to support your family. So what does vocational rehabilitation do? And I'm going to say voc rehab, so I don't have to talk with that mouthful. We work with individuals with disabilities who want to work. And as part of that, we are going to provide individualized services, and individualized is the key word in that phrase, to help you prepare for, obtain, maintain, or advance in employment. So we're there all along the spectrum. So some people come to us, they already have a job, they just have had something to happen that maybe they're afraid they're going to lose their job. Other people, they may be working in an entry-level job and maybe they have the opportunity to become a manager, but with that, there's some things that they need. Then we can come in and work with that individual and the employer to make sure that that individual is as successful as possible. So I will admit up front that the vocational rehabilitation system can be very hard to navigate. Um, and a lot of that is because we have standards that we have to meet that the federal government gives us. So then there's a lot of paperwork involved, and there's a lot of meetings, and there's a lot of communication that needs to happen. So everyone has to go through those steps. It's not just, singling anyone out to make them go through all the steps, but everybody has to do it. So there are some things that might help you feel more comfortable. Um, Ask questions, which I know can be hard sometimes. Sometimes you don't know what you don't know, so you may not know what question to ask. And then you'll leave and you'll say, oh, I wish I would have asked that question. It's okay to go back if you need to, and ask the question. Ask for clarification. And again, sometimes you don't know where you might need clarification. We are bad about using acronyms. Um, so when you hear someone say VR, and maybe you don't remember what that means, ask for clarification. There's always the opportunity, and I would say the right to take notes during your meetings with your vocational rehabilitation counselor. And what a vocational rehabilitation counselor is an individual who has received training, whether that was once they were hired or they have a degree related to vocational rehabilitation counseling. And their job is to help you navigate the system, come up with goals, and um, work with you to figure out how to reach those goals. Everybody's goals are a little different. So before I start talking about voc rehab counselor, I wanted to clarify what that was. So again, taking notes. But the other thing is, and don't be afraid to do this, is it's okay to bring someone with you, whether they talk during the appointment or not. Sometimes you just need to have someone there to have some be your cheerleader in your corner, and that's fine. Sometimes it's another set of ears to have, um, so that you can kind of compare notes afterwards and make sure that you both heard the same thing. So like I said, I know it can be intimidating. I know it can seem to take a long time before um, we can really start getting into the meat of what you need. But hopefully, these are some things you can think about doing when you have appointments so that it is a little less intimidating and difficult. The next thing I want to talk about is confidentiality, because that's a concern that a lot of people have. Anytime that you are going in and meeting with someone, you want to feel like it's a safe and secure environment. And so we cannot release any information unless you give us permission to release it. So what that means is maybe you are working and you'd like for a voc rehab employee to talk to your employer. That's fine, we can do that, but we want to make sure that you give us written permission so that if anything happens, if the employer comes back and is like, why did you do that? I don't know why you were the one talking to me, then we can say, yes, we have permission to do that. There are, however, some limits to confidentiality, and that would be to protect your safety or someone else's. Um, it could be required by law in your state that there are other opportunities, or not opportunities, other reasons that your confidentiality would have to be broken, or if there's a court order to do so. So if you were in some legal proceeding and they want to bring in information about your work history or how a vocational rehabilitation agency is helping you. Then if they subpoena us, then we have to at least respond to the subpoena. So yes, while it is a secure environment, in a confidential environment, we just need to let you know up front that there are times when there are limits to the confidentiality. And that's really to make sure that while you're working with us, basically nothing happens that we can try to prevent that may compromise your safety or someone else's. I have to say that I was a counselor for 9.5 years, I think. And in that period of time, I only had to break someone's confidentiality once. So it doesn't even come up that often usually. Um, and that was a very significant issue going on with some abuse that I had to report. So again, there are steps that you have to go through in order to get services started and be able to move on to the next steps. The first one is to meet with a voc rehab counselor to apply for services. Different states do this different ways. So they may have you fill out the application. Maybe it's an online application first, and then you go in and talk to them. Some people or some agencies may have you come in or meet with your counselor over Zoom or another platform, and you'll fill it out together. So there's a couple different options for that. Here in Kentucky, we can meet with people over the phone, over a virtual platform like Zoom, or in person. So there's a lot of flexibility there because in Kentucky, we realize that some people don't have the transportation in order to get somewhere. And at least at the beginning of services, before we really have a chance to sit down with you and talk to you about what some transportation options may be, that definitely allows for some flexibility if we give options. But I'm not saying that every state has those options for applying for services. The next step is that the counselor will determine your eligibility. So yes, you have to be eligible for services. And there's a lot of different ways that we gather information to know whether or not you're eligible. Eligibility doesn't mean that we're looking at you trying to rule out helping you, but under the federal law, there's some things that we have to look at first. So that may be medical information, any assessments that you already have had. So maybe you've had you filled out a vocational interest inventory, or you've done some career counseling. That really happens a lot when students are in high school. A lot of high schools are set up with a class that may have you starting to look at what you're interested in doing, existing records. So that could be grades, that could be medical information, it could be a variety of things. It may even be something like a resume that you have. So those are just some of the types of existing information that we may look at. And then the other thing is we're going to look at functional limitations. Basically, what that means is how does your disability impact you both at home, in school, at work? That would include some things like communication. Maybe you're someone that also has dyslexia, and it's hard for you to be able to read things and comprehend them. So that's a functional limitation that you may have. Um, Another one would be, are you able to get yourself up and going and get to appointments, follow through with appointments, whether that be with us or a doctor's office, um, interviews, that kind of thing. Um, Mobility. So are you able to get around, know your options for transportation and that kind of thing? I will say that at least this part of the application process and the eligibility process really has more of a negative spin than how I used to like to be. So when you sit down and you start talking about this with your counselor, it doesn't mean that we want to look at you in a negative way. It's just that sometimes you have to talk about things that you can't do first in order to get to what you can do. So I don't want anyone to think that it's a negative process. It can feel that way, I'm sure, but that's not what the purpose is. And then once you're determined eligible, and I will say that each state has a little bit different process um, and guidance that they have in terms of what makes someone eligible. The next step would then be to develop an individualized plan for employment. And so I think everybody, all the agencies refer to that as an IPE. So you may hear those acronyms or those letters used. But basically, it's laying out what is going to happen, what kind of services you need, and who will provide those um, in order to reach your ultimate goal of some type of employment. Um, so, our goal is for you to be in a stable employment situation for at least 90 days in competitive integrated employment. And you might say, what does that mean? Because I'm used to using that phrase, but not everybody is. So competitive, we want you to be making at least minimum wage. And of course, that varies from state to state and sometimes city to city within a state. Integrated, um, that means that you are not just working with other individuals who have disabilities. We want you to be out there. Um, if you want to work in a retail environment like Walmart, we want you to be working with people that may have disabilities, but then also people that may not have disabilities. So we want you to be out there just like anybody else that wants to do a job, wants to work. And then employment, of course, is having a job. Um, and I will say that sometimes when you come to us, you don't have any idea what you want to do, and that's okay. That's one reason that Voc Rehab exists, is to help you figure that out to reach your goal of getting a job. I know that when I was little, I was convinced I was going to be an astronaut. Then I got into high school and I was convinced I was going to be an engineer. I'm not either one of those. I got into the helping profession because that's where my passion is. Um, so we can help you figure that out. And it could be that it's going to change, because just because we have disabilities does not mean that we have to be able to choose that perfect job right away. And it could be that uh, your interests change as well. So um, it's not always a straight line. A lot of times it is a winding back and forth path, but it's still going to get you to where you want to be. Once you do get at least those 90 days in the competitive integrated employment, and you should be stable for at least those 90 days, then your case will be closed. So what does that mean? Basically, just like I said, it means that you have reached your employment goal and you're stable on the job. Now, all of us go through periods of time where maybe we don't feel like our employment's stable, but we want to make sure that you're set up to have the opportunity for that stable employment. So when we say your case is closed, that's what it means. It's just that you've reached that goal. The good thing is that from being able to maintain that job, or like I said at the beginning, we also help people advance in their careers. Um, so, there's a lot involved with it, but just because it gets closed once doesn't mean it's closed forever. So that's an important thing to remember. So there's a lot of different services that we can provide, and we, as in uh, vocational rehabilitation agencies, and these are all kind of set forth by the federal government. And this is not an exclusive or exhaustive list at all. I apologize, for some reason I'm getting these messages here. Hopefully that'll stop them. So an example would be assistive technology, or some people call it rehabilitation technology. So it may be something as simple as having something to record lectures in school, or maybe you need a piece of technology to be able to do your job, whether that may be a special piece or a special software that you may need. It could be just a little change in, there it keeps going, a little change in your work setup. So if you're a wheelchair user, sometimes you just have to raise the desk a little bit so you can get your wheelchair under it. So it's just little things like that that could be considered technology. Doesn't have to be anything big. Post-secondary training. So that's just a long way of saying any kind of training that happens after you exit high school, whether that's graduating with a diploma or aging out of school. So there's all different kinds of training that you can obtain once you've graduated or once you've left school. That could range from a trade school. So maybe you're interested in being an electrician. That's a type of training that you could get. Community college, technical college is another type of training. So that could be training to become a registered nurse. It could be training to learn how to do computer coding, for example, website coding, something like that. It could also be all the way up to a graduate degree. I know in Kentucky, we've helped people become doctors, pharmacists, lawyers, and that's not what everybody wants to do, but we can assist with possibly some funding to help with those expenses that you would incur, especially related to tuition, while you're going through that training. Now, again, each state does it a little differently. In Kentucky, we have a limit on how much we can give someone per year who's in training, but other states may pay more than us, and other states may pay less than us. It's really a broad spectrum across the nation. Job exploration is another one. So, what is it that you want to do? Maybe give you some exposure to what's out there. If you've never had the opportunity to really learn about different jobs, you don't know what it may be out there that you would be interested in. So maybe you never thought about being a mechanic. I mean, you know what a mechanic does, but do you really know what all is involved in that? So maybe you do, maybe you don't. But one thing that Voc Rehab can help you with is, exploring more about, okay, what does a mechanic do? What kind of training do they need? Um, Most importantly, for a lot of people, how much money do you make? Um, those kind of things. It may also include going and talking to somebody who, using the example I've just been using, somebody who's a mechanic who can tell you more about what they do. And then there's all different kinds of mechanics too. Um, they may specialize in working on engines, brakes, transmissions. So there's all different kinds of mechanic jobs that you could get. Resume writing, that's a big one. I know that when I was a counselor, I would help a lot of people either um, tweak their resumes if you already have one, update it, or sometimes you come in and you just need um, someone to help you sit down and write it. And so that's something that Voc Rehab can do. Practice interviewing. I know that interviewing can be scary. I hate interviewing, honestly, but if you have practice, you can build up that confidence and know better how to answer questions, um, especially being able to think on your feet, because, sometimes they'll throw in questions that maybe you weren't expecting or that don't seem to be related. So being able to have that practice so that if something like that situation comes up, then you're able to navigate it and do better at your interview. Job placement, that's probably one of the biggest things that we do. So that includes helping you look for job openings, um, maybe referring you to jobs, um, basically what you would need in order to become employed. So now networking is a big thing. You can apply through LinkedIn or Indeed, or going to the company's website and filling out the application there. But it always helps if you know somebody who knows somebody. So that can be an option with the job placement too. You may be the kind of person that's like, I don't want anybody, talking on my behalf. I don't want anyone going to an interview with me. But again, you just need some referrals to jobs that you could apply for. Employer consultation. So that can be a variety of things. That could be something like you giving us permission to talk to your supervisor about where you're having um, issues at work. And it's good to hear about the good things too. It's not all negative. And maybe it would be a conversation about any kind of accommodations you may need. Um, so different things like that. But again, it all goes back to helping you either obtain a job, maintain a job, or advance in a job. On the job supports, so there are times where someone may need a little extra help on the job. So it could be someone that just comes in for a few days or a few weeks and helps you get acquainted with your job and your environment and that kind of thing. Sometimes people need more ongoing supports. So there are companies and agencies in the community that your vocational rehabilitation agency may work with to have them provide those on the job supports for longer, um, until you get more stable on the job. Do we have any questions? Just wanted to stop and take a break.
Hi, yeah, we do have one question, and it's a question specifically about catheters, but So the question was, and I'm sorry that I'm bouncing around here. The question was from somebody who works. This is a person with spina bifida who works, and is there a way, and this person lives in California, is there a way that California rehab can help me get catheters?
It would be a possibility. That's the thing about the individualized services. It's not usually a blanket yes or no. So it would be something where you would have to talk to probably a voc rehab counselor at the I think it's Department of Rehabilitation there, um, and really see what your needs are, and that gives you an opportunity to advocate for yourself about what you may need to be successful on the job. So that's probably not a really good answer per se, because I don't exactly know what happens in California, but I would definitely encourage you to contact them, or if you're already working with them, talk to your voc rehab counselor about what it is that you feel like you need.
And along with that, so that also raised another question, which is, basically in terms of the catheters, these are obviously something that's essential to be able
Mm-hmm.
to continue working. And then along those lines, there are other things that might also be essential to continue working. So, for example, we hear from members of the community who have spina bifida who mentioned that, for XYZ reason, insurance isn't approving updating their wheelchair. Um, so, is there a role then that folk rehab can play to help people get that kind of essential item that they need to be able to continue working?
I think that is a great question. And I know here in Kentucky we do assist with that. So I know wheelchairs don't last forever, so that there may be times when you need a new one for that reason. There may be times when you need a specific, maybe cushion or attachment, or another type of item to go with the wheelchair that will make it um, better for you, and you're able to use it um, more effectively and efficiently. So that would definitely be something to talk to the agency about. I know a lot of times insurance just doesn't want to pay for things. And if you do have insurance, that would always be the first option for how you would get that specific piece of equipment or item. However, that is a service that can be provided by a voc rehab agency or
Mm.
similar services.
Oh, thank you. We got a comment. We got a comment about that saying that your doctor should be able to help you with that. And yeah, for sure, like that's definitely one of
Yes,
the options, for sure. But sometimes, when we speak to adults, sometimes that's not enough. It doesn't cover everything. But along those
sure.
lines, I'm also wondering then, because also essential to being able to work is transportation. And
Hmm.
if you already did or are going to mention it, I know that Voc Rehab is also able to help with some public transportation options.
Yes, and so, um, of course, different places have different access to public transportation, but it may be something like if you have public transportation and maybe you would need a bus pass for the first month or so of a job so that you can kind of get on your feet and be able to afford that, then that's something, at least here in Kentucky, that we do. Um, Kentucky only has about, I don't know, four, I would say, larger cities, with Louisville being the biggest, Lexington being the next biggest, but outside of those, probably three, four cities, as I would call them, are areas of the state, then you're looking at maybe a taxi, maybe an Uber or Lyft, but it may not even be anything like that. So you may be catching a ride with somebody. We are able to help you to be able to contribute some gas money with that. So maybe um, working with you to figure out, okay, um, we're going 20 miles each way. You don't necessarily have to pay for the whole tank of gas to be able to get back and forth. But maybe, you want to contribute to show um, basically your gratitude for them, helping you out. And lots of people rely on each other for transportation. So that's another thing. How each state would go about that is probably different in every state, but that's definitely something to discuss.
And so, and I know that you have more information, but is also this is something that comes up as well is
Mhm.
um either if you whether like for example, if you have a van that's adaptable or I'm sorry, that's adapted, and some of those things need to be updated, maybe the hand controls don't work anymore.
Mhm.
Um like are you able to help with any kinds of, vehicle related expenses?
Again, I know in Kentucky we do, and I don't know why another state would not do that because that's definitely an option for service under um, the federal law that governs what we do. I know that we've done everything from helping people get the setup that they need to have the vans or the transportation that they need. And things are going to wear out for sure. So if that's going to prohibit you from being able to get to your job, especially, then should be able to do something to help out with that. Um, so yeah, definitely is a need that a lot of people have. Just a little different way of looking at transportation, but uh, I would definitely ask. And if you're not currently working with a voc rehab agency, it's not going to hurt to call and ask to speak to somebody and kind of get a feel of what they do in your state to be able to kind of make a decision about whether or not you feel like pursuing voc rehab services at this point in time is something that you want to do. So it's just an option to help.
Well, thank you. I'll let you keep going with your presentation, but we might have more questions later.
Absolutely. Like I said, I don't mind for you to ask while I'm in the middle of the presentation. I don't mind that at all. So just checking my time there. So this is the service that we do that I am most passionate about, and that's helping students transition from high school into adult life. So there are services available to students who are still in high school. When those start varies from state to state, should at least start by age 16. In Kentucky, we start at age 14 because that's when the schools start talking to you and the family about um, those transition services. So what are you going to need to be prepared for life after high school? So we want to start um, providing some services so that hopefully when you go into adult life, you're able to be as successful as possible. Not saying that if we start providing these services while you're in school, that it's going to stop once you exit. Not at all. We're going to, like I said before, see you all the way through the process. And hopefully get you stable in a job for at least 90 days so that you can be considered successful. So like I said, there are services that um, may be started in while you're in high school. And that can be things like going back to that career exploration, helping you really figure out what it is that you might want to do. Like I said, I changed what I was interested in a few times, but it happens. I don't know anyone who really, really knew what they were going to do when they were in high school, but the goal would be to expose you to different kinds of careers, talk to you about financial things. Um, Hardly anybody uses a checkbook anymore, but how do I know how much money that I have? Um, where does that money come from when I use that little plastic card? Um, you still have to make sure that you have the money to be taken out of your account or pay that credit card bill. Um, what is it that um, you need in terms of help with maybe social skills? Some people just aren't as good in social situations as other people are, which isn't a good or bad thing. It's just is what it is. And so things like that, helping you be able to advocate for yourself. So, when you leave high school, there's no one there necessarily that's going to um, talk to your doctor for you, um, talk to maybe a college for you. And in order for them to even do that, you probably would have to sign a release of information for those conversations to even take place. So a lot of places want you to be able to speak up for yourself. So how do I advocate for myself? How do I need to get, can I get those accommodations that I may need for some sort of training or going to work? And maybe advocating for yourself with doctors in terms of um, letting them know what your concerns are and what you feel like you need. So that kind of thing. Let's see. Those are kind of the main things. And like I said, services can continue to be provided after a student leaves high school. So um, sometimes people or families feel like they've had this support of the school all the way through, and then all of a sudden you're dropping off a cliff. And that's not um, how it is in most situations. And it's definitely not how I would want to be treated. So, there's that continuum of services that can be provided throughout um, the need to, like I said, obtain, maintain, or advance in employment. So another important thing is to know what your rights are when you're working with a vocational rehabilitation agency. Um, in the law, it talks about informed choice. So we want you to be able to have enough information to know what the pros and cons are of maybe 2 or 3 different options so that you can make a choice based on information and not just what you think. So that's really important. I know that it's kind of like, I would almost compare it to maybe getting a mortgage. Like, you want to know what you're getting into before you get into it. You got to make sure that you have enough money to be able to make that monthly payment. You got to make sure that um, you like the house and that that there's nothing wrong with that house. That's going to end up costing you a bunch of money right after you buy it, if you can help that at all. So that's the type of informed decision making that we are talking about. You need to know how to file an appeal. So it could be that you're working with your counselor, the counselor is not agreeing with your decisions that you're making, and you feel like, something needs to be done or you need to talk to somebody else. Then a lot of times there's a progression of who you go on to talk to. So maybe you talk to your counselor and you can't come to an agreement. So maybe the next step would be to talk to their manager or supervisor, and it just kind of keeps going up until you are able to talk to someone and hopefully get a agreed upon resolution. The next one is to know how to contact your client assistance program, and I'll talk about that possibly the next slide, if not the slide after that. And I'll talk a little bit about what they are. And then expect that all the information about you and your case are going to be kept confidential. Talked about confidentiality a little earlier. I think it is important to know too that maybe I'm your counselor and I've got to go on medical leave for some reason. There may be a supervisor or another counselor that's covering your case. So that may be some time or an example of a time when you are not talking to the same counselor. So somebody else would have your information. But with us all being in the same agency, that's a little different because we're not releasing it to anybody outside of the agency. Now you can, make the decision about what you want to disclose to them, because you may not have that relationship with them as you would your regular counselor, but still that information is going to be kept confidential in terms of anyone outside the agency. And actually inside the agency, it's on a need to know basis. So we're not going around talking about you behind your back, or we shouldn't be. So what can a client assistance program do? First of all, the client assistance program is there to help kind of mediate and answer questions about vocational rehabilitation. There are people that come and they go through the process and they still don't understand what voc rehab does, or maybe you don't understand why a decision may be being made about your case, and it's not always something that is a problem. There could just be questions that you would feel more comfortable with asking a neutral third party about. So the best thing is their services are free. You can contact them however many times you feel like you need to, and you're never going to be charged for their services. And then they assist individuals with disabilities. Maybe you're already involved with voc rehab or independent living services, or maybe that you want to be involved with us. They can help answer questions like that. They can help connect you with your voc rehab office. So those are some of the different kinds of things that they can do. They also can provide guidance about Title I, or the employment title that goes along with the Americans with Disabilities Act. Sometimes they have more up-to-date information or better information than maybe your voc rehab counselor has. Maybe you feel like you're on the job, but you're being discriminated against because of your disability. So those are the kind of things that may be related to Title I of the ADA that they could help you with. And so there's a QR code on the next slide on how to locate your client assistance program office. that covers your area. Every state has at least one agency that's required by law. And so they all do the same thing, may just approach it a little differently, but they all do the same thing. They all have the same charge. So there's the QR code. Give you a second in case anybody wants to try to scan that from their screen. I can go back to that if you need me to. Um, every state has at least one vocational rehabilitation agency. So every state is going to have one, and they'll cover the entire state. But some states have individual agencies that are for maybe blind, visually impaired, and then a separate agency that covers all the other disabilities. Those are becoming fewer and fewer every year, but that still does exist in some states. But there's always services for your whole state. Judy, did you have a question or comment from the chat box?
Yes, I have
Yeah.
a question. Can you
Sure.
hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Will you say again how a young person in high school becomes connected to vocational rehabilitation?
Yes, thank you. I am just realizing that I left that part out. A lot of times, if you are receiving any special education services, so whether that's through the individualized education program, I think that's what IEP stands for. I get all my acronyms mixed up. So sometimes the school itself will refer you. Sometimes you or your family may just call the local office and refer yourself, which is fine. Sometimes it's a friend or family member who's had interactions with our offices. They may refer you, so there are a lot of different ways that you may find yourself getting involved with Voc Rehab.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Juanita?
Hi, it took me a second to unmute myself. Yeah, okay, so I do have a couple of questions, not so
Okay,
much related to this. So I don't know if you wanted to show the QR code for this, and then I can ask my questions.
sure. So, this is a QR code for being able to find out contact probably for the main office for the vocational rehabilitation agency in your state. Usually this list is kept pretty up to date, but we all know that sometimes it can be hard to keep the information up to date, especially when it's kind of a centralized location, like what this QR code will take you to.
Great. Well, so I do have, I didn't know, is there another, may I ask a couple of questions now? Is this a good time?
Absolutely.
Okay. So one of the other questions I had was, it's probably a dumb one, but do you have to have Social Security insurance in order to get Voc Rehab? Is that one of the requirements?
It is not. So we work with a lot of people that don't have Social Security insurance or Social Security disability insurance, so SSI or SSDI. That is not a requirement. We just have to have some kind of documentation that you have a disability and what that disability is. So we definitely don't limit it to people who are getting SSI or SSDI.
Thank you. And a few slides back, you were talking about the IPE. What was that? The individual
Plan for employment.
okay. So does the employer or prospective employer get that individual plan for employment? Or is that just between you and the VR?
Unless you request that it's shared with somebody, it would just be between you and the vocational rehabilitation agency. I never had an occasion where someone wanted me to share that with someone else, but we certainly could if you sign that release of information. Um, so it's not something that has to be done. It's just something where you would have the option to be able to do that if you chose to have it shared.
Okay, and I think the reason I was thinking about that was, it just made me wonder if, how much information, in your experience, how much information do employees or prospective employees need to release to their new employer about some of their medical needs that, for example, again, if you have spina bifida, some of the needs that you might have, to be able to take, a break every so often to go use the restroom.
Mhm.
Those are some of the questions that we get sometimes from members of the community, just how do you navigate that conversation, or you don't navigate that conversation with employers? Like, what are your suggestions on that?
Okay. Another great question. It really comes down to, I would say, what you're comfortable with. There are some things that are going to indicate that you have a disability. So, for example, if you're coming in a wheelchair, then the employer is going to be aware that there's something going on. Um, and people really approach that in a couple different ways, and or maybe three different ways. Um, some people may not tell them anything, and then when an issue comes up, then they will go to their employer and say, "Hey, I need this." My caution with that would be, again, if you're coming in and you're using um, crutches or wheelchair or something where it's very obvious that there's a disability, then I would say I would go ahead and maybe at least mention it. You wouldn't have to have like an in-depth conversation. Um, but if you know that there's something you're gonna need, like more frequent bathroom breaks, then that would be appropriate to be talked about, maybe when you first start, or when you realize, hey, I'm definitely gonna need that. There's people who share too much, which you've got to be careful about that. Um, Really, unless you choose to do that, nobody has to know your business, really. You don't have to talk to coworkers about it. They may ask you questions, and you may just have to find a way to um, navigate around that. And then you've got people in the middle that will really decide based upon whatever situation they encounter. So I can't really give one great answer about that, but I would say that um, you may start out one way, say when you start a job, and then things happen and you feel like you're gonna have to disclose some more. Um, Obviously, once you've disclosed something, you can't really take that back. So that's why I would caution against sharing everything. But really, that's in your control. That is something that you could talk to your voc rehab counselor about and try to figure out what's going to work best for you and what the best approach may be. But it's not something that you have to do.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time to answer those questions. And was there more that not? But I just realized we've got 1 minute left. Was there more in the presentation?
No, there's not.
Oh,
So
okay.
this might be a good time for you to share the information that you got from the gentleman. I guess it was earlier today.
Yeah, just earlier today I was able to just chat with one of the adults that that we know that, collaborate with the association and different activities and committees. And he mentioned that he had a really positive experience with vocational rehabilitation in his state in California. And that Voc Rehab in California was able to help him to pursue higher education and eventually go on to have a career. And specifically, it was paying for tuition to get some of that professional training. So that, that's just one example of, I'm sure, many of, people who've had like some really good positive experiences with Voc Rehab, but, without really, and that's why we really appreciate you sharing all this information to help us understand more of what you can do.
And Janelle, will you go back to the QR code for the CAP?
Yes.
I forget what CAP stands for. Oh, there you go. Thank you. Someone requested that. Well, thank you
Okay. Yeah.
for a wonderful presentation about a program that I think everyone doesn't know a lot about and doesn't know that it's really available with an ask. And I think personally, the sooner one gets involved with this program, like in high school, it'll go probably better. Thanks to Janelle for recommending another speaker that's related to this topic. Will happen on December the 12th at 7 p.m. Eastern, benefits and employment. I think that it will relate to what Janelle has talked about tonight. Please complete the evaluation that you will receive after the session, and you all will receive a recording. Anyone who register will receive a recording, and then this recording will reside in our YouTube directory. So with that, I think we're ready to say goodnight.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Janelle. We really, really appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Mhm.